What is your husband hunt?
All right. Charlie, are we waiting for anybody still?
I think you said Sarah was on, right?
Okay.
Good.
Okay, I'd like to call to order this planning and zoning meeting on March 28th, 2023 at 6:00 PM. Can I get a roll call vote? Yeah, attendance.
Member Mormon,
Here.
Richie,
Here.
Ferris,
Oh, fair, yeah. Sorry.
you're good. Bordeman, here. Rebo, Babe,
Here.
Oldwich, Decker, Ormsby,
All right, thank you. Okay, agenda item 3A would be approval of the March 28th agenda.
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as written.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
Those opposed? And then the next would be item 4A, approval of the March 14th meeting minutes. Can I get a motion for that?
I'll make a motion to approve the March 14th meeting minutes.
Second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
Anyone opposed? All right, item number 5 would be public comment. This would be for anyone that is here to discuss something that is not on our agenda. Do I have anyone here for that? Bethany? And we don't have any old business currently. So item number 7A would be consider recommendation on request for approval of a plat of survey for Matt Thomas on behalf of Warren County for property identified as parcel number 488-7024-0642.
and we'll see if we can get on this screen. Okay, so this is a plat of survey request for Warren County that was submitted by Matt Thomas. The proposed plat of survey would create parcel P, which is a 0.06 acre lot, so smaller lot. The county has indicated that this split is for purpose of sale / transfer to the adjacent property owner. The plat does show a deed restriction that renders this parcel as non-buildable. We did receive one public comment about this split, and that public comment just indicated that they were concerned of a trail going in this area. There's been no indication through this plat of survey process that a trail would be going in on either property. Staff is recommending approval for this plat as submitted.
Thank you. Do I have any questions or concerns from the commission?
I have a question. Is this property, is there a trail proposed through this area on the city's trails plan?
No. Yes. No, there is. And I'll double check that. I know
Was once.
there was once, this is well before I was here, and I know that this came up, and from the way I understand it, the neighborhood opposed the trail going through here, but I believe our updated trail plan does not include it on there, but just let me verify that because I don't want to misspeak on it. Yeah, the current trails plan that is in place now shows. Just trying to orient myself. Does show that the trail would be put in alongside Iowa Avenue as a roadside trail. Not through this creek bed.
Thank you.
Any other questions? like to speak on this agenda item? Do we have anyone that would like to make a motion?
I'd like to move approval of option
I'll second that.
Roll call vote.
Boardman? Yes. Ritchie?
Yes.
Harris?
A. Yes.
Yes.
Brave?
Yes.
We have 7B, would we consider recommendation regarding an amendment to chapter 165 related to commercial vehicle park?
All right, you all have the staff report on this one. Just some quick background on this. This is based off a complaint that was received by a few staff members and city council members on February 8th of 2023. As we did receive this complaint on March 6, 2023 at the regular meeting, the city council did refer this action item to the Planning and Zoning Commission to review and consider amendments to chapter 165 regarding commercial vehicle parking in the city. Currently, chapter 165 does not address the parking of commercial vehicles in residentially zoned areas on private property. And I want to make sure we emphasize that. I know the commission's aware of this, but typically zoning looks at what happens on private property, not necessarily in the public right of way. And there's other areas of code that cover the public right of way portions of property. As part of this, we at the staff level kind of went over a few things as we discussed this. We did want to note that additionally, our current noise ordinance does not discuss the idling of louder vehicles in overnight hours and only disallows any truck, trailer, or other trailers from parking on public streets. So that's currently what the code says. Okay, there we go. So going back to the complaint was there was a commercial FedEx step van that was parked on private residential property and on street. There was pictures that were included in the complaint that are on the screen there as well. And the other portion of the complaint was that this vehicle was being started early in the morning and left running for long periods of time and causing a disturbance. So wanted to point out currently with chapter 165, when we look at recreational vehicles, chapter 165 currently does allow for the parking and storage of vehicles, trailers, recreational vehicles, campers, boats, and other similar recreational equipment on private property. We are not proposing to change any of that. That is all going to stay the same. What we are proposing is that we would look at clarifying that those spaces are not meant for the long-term storage of those types of vehicles. Really what this comes down to is, let's say you have a mobile home, not a mobile home, an RV that has been broken down, hasn't been used for a while, and is just being stored on the property as junk. That really clarifies that they're not meant for that. Same thing with boats. A lot of times you'll see dismantled boats that are on properties and things like that. They typically will fall into a junk category, which I think we can enforce on, but I wanted to make sure that we were clear when we were looking at some of this stuff that you're really not, the RV storage, the boat storage and stuff like that. It is meant to just store while it's not in use, not necessarily long-term in that space. Lastly, that spaces are not meant for motor vehicle repair or disassembly. That was something when we were reviewing some other code sections in other cities that did enforce on that was commonly put in there. And I thought that was something worthwhile to put in our code as well too. And then lastly, that it clarifies that off-street parking facilities shall be maintained through the life of the principal use. I think that is implied already in our code, just bringing that out to make sure, again, when we look at Hy-Vee or Walmart or anything like that, those parking spaces that are provided when we review site plans, they're meant to be there for the life of the use that's there. They can't be taken out for other reasons. So looking into what we have proposed to add to the code, first of all, we want to define what commercial vehicles are in our zoning code. And we define those as off-street parking of commercial vehicle, what the code section says is off-street parking of commercial vehicles would be disallowed unless they are present for the temporary purposes of making deliveries, goods, or services. I don't think I need to explain that. But that's essentially, if you have a FedEx truck, that truck can park on a street while it is delivering goods. It can park in somebody's driveway while it's delivering good. If you're moving, for example, that moving truck can park there. It can park on that property while you're moving. But what we have to look at is the definition of commercial vehicles, and we define a commercial vehicle as having one of 4 different characteristics. The first one would be having a curb weight more than 10,000 pounds or exceeding 24 feet in length and designed to carry passengers or to haul or tow vehicles, freight, or merchandise. Played around with this one a little bit, and I looked up quite a few of the larger kind of passenger trucks that you can purchase. The largest ones I found were just over 7,500 pounds and just over 22 feet long. So I think, you know, those bigger trucks that people have, we're covering that and making sure that those are not counted as commercial vehicles. As we're looking at it, really becomes anything larger than some of those vehicles. The second one that we would disallow would be any tow truck, dump truck, stake bed truck. Let me go through this. Actually, I have this set up. So tow truck, dump truck, stake bed truck, flatbed truck. And as I'm going through these pictures are kind of coming up showing you examples. Step vans, refuse or garbage trucks, buses, semi-tractor, cabs, or trailer, and any other special purpose vehicle that would be related to those. Third, any tractor, backhoe, blade, bucket, bulldozer, compactor, crane scraper, excavator, front end loader, or other construction equipment or attachments. So this really just falls into those construction vehicles that you'll commonly see used with construction. Third one gets into agricultural equipment, and it states any agricultural tractor, farm implements, or attachments, moving equipment. This kind of goes a little bit more after agricultural, goes into some other stuff. So moving equipment, brush hogs, trimmers, spreaders, and other lawn, landscape, and turf maintenance equipment or attachments or other similar equipment. So that's really what falls into the definition of a commercial vehicle, really, and using all those examples is what we're looking at. Is that's what our zoning code would define as a commercial vehicle. So really, from the Planning and Zoning Commission standpoint, you're charged with reviewing changes to Chapter 165 in the zoning code, and that's just a quick summary of those changes that we're looking at. However, to supplement this, staff did also look at other sections of our code. While you're not required to make a recommendation on those other sections of code, I want to bring them to your attention because I think it kind of looks at more comprehensively at what we're doing for residential neighborhoods in these types of situations. So the next section we looked at was section 6909, and this deals with parking in the public right of way. Currently, the section states that no person shall park a motor truck, semi-trailer, or any other type of trailer in the public right of way. It does provide an exception for trucks parked on the public square for purposes of loading and unloading freight or merchandise for the length of time that it takes. So what we're proposing to do is to amend this section to state the following shall not be parked on any street. It would include the commercial vehicles as defined in the zoning code, which I just went over, trailers, recreational vehicles, campers, boats, and other similar recreational equipment. And again, I just want to clarify, this is in the public right of way. This is not on private property. So while we're saying yes, in the public right of way, you can't park RVs, campers, and boats, they are still allowed on private property as long as it's on a hard surface. And that's something our code currently requires. Furthermore, we do propose to amend that section to accept the following. First would be mobile food and beverage vendors as allowed through section 122.22. We do allow these currently to be parked on the square, for example, and make sure that we're not having any conflicts with the code and that those are allowed to stay for the purposes of the mobile food and beverage vendors. And then lastly, parking for the purposes of loading and unloading freight or merchandise, similar to what we had just in the square, but then taking that to all streets within the city. We added construction and maintenance on the public right of way for the length of time which those activities required, and then provided that 10 feet of roadway width remains open for the movement of vehicular traffic. And that again is for all streets, not just the square. And then lastly, relating to the noise complaint that we had, section 48 or chapter 48, and specifically section 48.05 does regulate standards for control of excessive sound and vibration within the city. And seeks to protect the public's health, safety, and general welfare through regulations. Like I said, currently there is no regulation related to excessive vehicle noise. So we did add in there to add a regulation which would prohibit plainly audible vehicle noise at a distance of 50 feet between 9 PM and 7 AM. So with that, your recommendation, or excuse me, your alternatives were listed in the staff report on some actions that the Planning and Zoning Commission can take from staff standpoint. As we look through this and run this by other city departments, Public Works and PD, we think that this kind of covers the complaint that was received by the city council, and is some regulations that can be added in there. And looking at further steps in the future, if Planning and Zoning Commission does forward a recommendation this evening, we would look at having the council set a public hearing on this for April 3rd. That notice will be published on April 11th. The meeting for the public hearing would be on May 1st. As this is an ordinance change, it does require 3 considerations by council, which would take place on May 1st, May 15th, and June 5th. And then the ordinance would be enacted upon publication in the newspaper, which, if all of these steps along the way were met, would be on June 13th of this year. So with that, I would be happy to answer any questions if you have them.
Do you have any questions?
Go ahead. You go ahead.
Did you consider treating the square separately? And the reason I raise that issue is if you take some of those large pickup trucks, 4 doors, full bed, put a trailer hitch on the back of it, which sticks out another foot. They eat up part of the driveway going around the square. And if you find a situation where there's one on the south side and one across the street opposite of it, you've almost made it into a one-way street. And they're not maybe commercial vehicles, but think if you're going to address these things, maybe consideration ought to be given to some special regulations for the square other than just commercial vehicles. I know that's an added layer of contention, but I think it's a problem.
Yeah, and again, the current code covered that for delivery vehicles, and I know that's not what you're talking about. You're talking about just regular people who might be up there with a trailer and everything on there. Yeah. I think currently we cover that to an extent as we say that trailers aren't on there. Now, the language I think is interpreted by PD a lot of times to mean semis when we're talking about trailers, because I think that's how that code section was written. I don't know because I wasn't here necessarily when it was written, but yeah, it's not a bad idea. It just kind of went a little bit above the scope of what we were looking at on this.
Now, I'm really talking about those big four-door pickup trucks with a full bed. I don't know how long they are, but they're
Yeah.
long.
Based off, again, just some of the language or some of the stuff that we looked at, the longest one I was seeing was about 22 feet long.
I saw one the other day that really, I wish I had had a tape measure with me because it had your deer preventive device on the front of it, which stuck out a certain distance. It had a big trailer hitch on the back of it. And between the two of them, they probably added 18 inches to the length of that truck. And those trailer hitches, I have one on my truck. I know what, they're nasty if you sideswipe one of them. Or if you back into it. And while it's not often, it is concern that I think some people might worry about.
I think I had a couple, my questions were a little bit different than that. I had a question, and maybe I just missed it. I was looking for what the definition of long-term parking would be in the section, the chapter 165 that we're referencing. Is it longer than 2 hours, longer than 8 hours, et cetera? And we're talking about boats and RVs, so I assume it's longer than a couple of hours, but is it 7 days?
I have that same question, is what is the definition of long-term storage, right? So we know there's a lot of people, and your picture depicted it, that there are a lot of people who do park their RVs in their usually a stall or an extra pad that they've laid for that RV for, I'll call it temporary purposes, but to me, it could be 6 months and it's, it's gone on the weekends, but it's back during the week. So
Yeah.
I too had that same long-term storage conversation or question.
And there's nothing in the code that defines what long-term means in that situation, but I think the thought process that we had on that was really what we're trying to avoid is somebody who is parking something there and never using it. How that's defined, I guess, yeah, that's probably a good question. I don't know what we would do if that came up. But I think what our intention was, again, was really to supplement like a motor V or an RV that was broken down and sitting there and had never been moving.
So the intention makes perfect sense. I guess my concern would be that if there's ambiguity to it, that it just opens everyone up for conflict. I know, and I'm just throwing this out there because it's something that I've seen before. I know that the covenants in an association I lived in previously had specified if it's unmoved for 7 days. So then, of course, then people work around it and they move their boat over 6 inches and leave it there for another 7 days. But you can't catch everything, but there was at least some sort of time frame.
And I'll tell you, I guess from my standpoint too on that one, I'm not gonna have any heartburn. Well, honestly, if none of this passed, I wouldn't have any heartburn because it was just, we were looking at things that was redirected to. But if that wasn't there, I think we're okay. Because again, it's really focusing on more of the junked and broke down vehicles that could be on there. We have other code sections that cover that right now too. This was just meant to supplement those and kind of, give it a little bit more force. But in the end, if we wanna look at getting rid of that, we can, or if we want to amend something to define what that long-term is, we can do that as well too. I'll tell you from an enforcement standpoint, on the long-term aspects of it, sometimes that gets a little bit hard to track because obviously we're not going to stake out your property for months at a time and see if a RV ever moves, for example. So, but yeah, that's kind of our thought process on it. Like I said, it was just meant to strengthen current stuff, but I think we have the ability within our current code and our junk vehicle section as well to take care of that.
And does that specifically address inoperable or there's some sort of clause that it can be checked? Okay.
Yeah, I think that's probably more fitting because I do think you'll have residents who, right, like they want that length of time and it might be an eyesore to them that their neighbor has an RV there, but it does move on the weekends. So I would agree, perhaps omit it or focus on inoperable, hasn't moved for X amount of months, whatever that looks like.
Yeah, that's true because it kind of opens the door then for maybe like complaints if someone were to say, well, my neighbor has their
That's my
RV
concern.
there and it says nothing for long term and then they'll want to know what it's defined as. So
Mhm.
I could see that happen.
It could become a major headache for whoever has to enforce it. I also had a question or a concern or a potential concern on the commercial vehicles topic. And my question really is, what are the potential unintended consequences that would be counter to what we're going for here? So, for example, I'm just gonna pick something out of the sky. The person who delivers Frito-Lays to the Hy-Vee and the Fairway decides that he or she wants to take their truck and park it in their driveway for their lunch hour. What happens in a scenario with this change?
It's obviously a code section in there. From our standpoint, and I'll just give you just a quick 101 in code enforcement. Typically, we see a violation, we send out notices, we usually give time. Our minimum time that we give people to remove something or take care of an issue is 7 days. So in that sense, I mean, if it was ever there, it was there during lunch, we saw it, we had a complaint and we were able to respond within 20 minutes of the complaint, which probably would never happen anyways. We'd send a letter, say, hey, it can't be parked here. Obviously, then I'll follow up. Most likely it wouldn't be there at that point. So.
I hear you. My concern is now if this was this person's regular, and I don't know that this exists at all in town, right? But I've seen it in other cases. If this is this person's regular routine and now they have to drive the truck, the chip truck someplace else or the bread truck someplace else to continue their day. I just, that would be, you don't want calls every day on that. I guess that was my concern.
That same, we're essentially saying that maybe like a Schwann's truck or whatever that
Yeah.
is, or like a Matco truck, right? Like people that do that for work, then they couldn't park in their driveway,
Yeah.
right? Is what we're trying to say here.
Yeah, so that's what I guess that was, yes, that's exactly kind of the vein of my question. Yeah.
I mean, so that's like the extreme commercial
Yep.
example, right?
So that goes back to private property versus public, right? So I think that maybe that's where we look at that is it, 2 hours on your private property? Because the kind of the goal is to get some of these people who are parking their vehicles off the streets overnight when they get off work. And then people are having to drive around them. So maybe that's the definition is on your own private property for under 2 hours a day. I don't know. We don't have to get that specific, but I think that's our goal is really trying to accomplish that. That
And
it's
Sarah, I think you're going down this same path. Like I get on street for a lot of the stuff, limiting it to. I also like, if someone does that for work and it's not dilapidated, right? It's not a repair project that's been there for months. If it's well kept, like, what do I care? Right? Now the separate issue there is the noise, right? Yes, people need to be good neighbors. That one makes more sense to me, right? Same reason, like when my kids are running around like banshees on a Friday night, at a certain point in the evening where it's like, I know who my neighbors are. Guys, let's control the chaos and come back in, or go talk to my neighbors and say, hey, we're gonna be a little chaotic tonight. Here's a bottle of wine, right? Like, but that's neither here nor there, and I guess my issue with all this is just I'm all for regulating certain things, right? Like we want to have a certain standard, again, have repair projects in driveways for months. That I'm all about. I'm personally don't see why we're trying to limit some of this off-street stuff, other than we were asked to have this discussion, right? That's the point of this commission. I don't have a whole lot of appetite for personally, and again, I'm one of, I think 5 of us tonight, if I can do math. I just don't know that I have appetite for going this extreme on off street. On street, let's talk about it, because yeah, it is annoying. And Al, I don't know that prepared tonight to talk about a square district versus not. Maybe we kick back to Carly and Emily to do some more work. But like I agree with you. Like I think when you're talking about public and commercial zones, public streets, commercial zones, I'm all for adding some regulations that make sense personally. So that's just my 2 cents in all this.
And so I can add to that too. And I just, again, that was kind of one of our goals here, was to kind of, I don't want to say come up with the most extreme regulations we could based off the complaint that we had, but essentially that's kind of what we looked at, was what is the most we can do here? Because we wanted to at least start there and then see if we can, if the appetite was there to maybe back off some of this stuff. So
That's for my appetite.
I think the other piece I had within that commercial one, Charlie, was that again goes back to like definition of length of time. I think about these newer developments and they have construction equipment in front of our houses all day long. They're gone at night, usually, sometimes overnight if they didn't finish their project and they're going to come back. But I could see again neighbors calling that in, that there's construction vehicles out on the street in that new development.
And on that, again, that in the street parking side of things, that was an exception that we provided for, was for construction vehicles that are parked on street.
Okay.
As long as they're there during the duration of the construction. So
Yeah, we might want to define that, because I had just jotted that one down too, because I saw making deliveries, goods and services. But again, I think it just goes back to maybe we just need to add that aspect as construction areas.
Charlie, on 48, 5, or the 9 to 7. That's
Pretty similar that we have in our noise ordinance right now is a lot of 9 to 7s for certain things in our noise ordinance.
kind of the precedent that we've
That's
established.
why we established that 9 to 7 again is, and I open it up, but again, all the ones that we had time limitations on overnight were all 9 to 7.
My question, and I think that one doesn't fall under that's kind of an extra.
It doesn't, but you don't have to. That's the thing is the code doesn't require you to do it. That doesn't mean that you can still provide the recommendations up there. I just wanted to be clear that it's a little bit outside of what regulations say that you're supposed to review, but in the past, we've had the Planning and Zoning Commission review different areas of code that necessarily aren't zoning, so.
Yes, what I, if we're gonna talk about what our opinion, what I would love to see in that particular piece is something that sets a specific decibel level. I feel like audible within 50 feet is again ambiguous, so I would like to see it with a specific decibel level, and I don't have the research to know what the appropriate level
Either,
is.
so.
88 decibels.
Is it?
Oh, I thought you were being serious.
I thought you had special knowledge.
Well, I mean, I usually run my sound system at church
60.
at 88. but
And I was really quick, just gonna look in here and see if our code had anything else in there regarding is,
It's kind of a
Yeah, I think.
standard, okay.
It also seems to me a little short, 9 to 7, maybe 10 to 6. There's a lot of people that are
Yeah.
up and gone by 7.
Yeah.
Especially if they're going to Des Moines, they don't want to get run over on 65, 69, or maybe a little ahead of that.
yeah. Don't disagree on any of that again, and just that was just everything that we had in there was there's exterior construction noise was 9 to 6. Everything else, lawn and garden equipment's 9 to 7, loading and unloading is 9 to 7. Off-road motorcycle and recreational vehicle noise is 9 to 7, model vehicles 9 to 7. So that's
Yeah, it
just.
feels like 10 to 6, right?
Right.
Like these people getting home, and then you're right, like a lot of people who then go into Des Moines, they're starting their vehicles up by 5, 6 to get to work on time.
Right, gosh,
Construction.
motorcycles
There's
are
like
loud. I can
five.
imagine a motorcycle exceeding this. Someone is riding their motorcycle to work or
Diesel trucks.
a diesel truck. Yeah, a lot of vehicles could exceed this that we weren't intending on capturing.
Do I have anyone in the audience that would like to speak on this? Come on up. No, you can if you want to. And just get you to state your name and address.
My name is Ron Dalby. My address is 804 North B Street. I just had a couple of clarifying questions, Charlie. So if you went back to a slide there where it was talking about the trailer.
On 1 second, let me get back on that. While it's on the screen, it's not currently on my individual screen.
Maybe you can just, so are we talking like a 30-foot flatbed? So let's say I have a neighbor who has a ton diesel truck, has a flatbed, and once or twice a week he pulls at home, parks it in front of his house, he has a skid loader on it. I mean, it's part of his livelihood. Are we talking about banning those type of things on the city streets?
Yes.
So I think we get into a path that I don't know is right. I mean, we're affecting people's livelihoods if we go down that road. I know it started with the FedEx guy. Just my concern is where it leads and dictating how people can and cannot make a living, where they can park their vehicles that help them in their course of life. So that was just kind of my concerns. Thank you.
So to add on to that, I jotted this down as well, this specific section 6909. I can just tell you on the block I live on, and mine's a dead end cul-de-sac. There's 2 or 3 boats parked on the street over the weekends. They're gone when they, the next morning when they take off for the lake, but then they're back at night until Sunday, and then they go put them back in storage. Campers are the same way.
So Christina Beach, 409 West Fifth Avenue. Similar questions. I have a real issue with the fact that I think we're impeding on people's right to work. Your construction vehicles, people who work in construction, they're driving flatbed trucks, parking them in their own driveways, not on the streets. But in this, we're gonna regulate whether they can park it in their own driveway. I have an issue with the noise and defining what is amplified sound. Most cities that have a regulation on that, typically it's the 60 decibels at 50 feet. I can start my car, I drive a Lincoln MKX, start it, walk 50 feet away from it, and I can hear my vehicle running. So it's gonna be up to interpretation as to whether that is amplified sound. So are we gonna look at,
Yeah, and I can just tell you from what we did on this one is I looked at a few other cities within the metro and essentially copy and pasted the regulations that they had in there. So it seems like they've worked in other communities. So again, when looking at this and just trying to address the complaints that were received by the city council, and trying to come up with some of the more extreme regulations that we can, like I said, I'm not married to these in any way, shape or form. This is just, I'm putting it all out on the table for the commission to discuss and go from there. So.
well, I mean, I got the guy's email, well, because I mean, he lives in my ward, so I understand his concern, but when it comes down to it, he's one person out of that entire neighborhood, and I think most of the neighbors in that neighborhood didn't have an issue with it, from my understanding. So
I have no idea.
The other issue I have is how we're defining commercial vehicles. I think that needs to be removed. If you look at the DOT standard for what a commercial vehicle is, yes, a lot of the things you listed falls under that, but technically under their DOT listing, it doesn't talk about anything other than passenger. Yeah, outside of that large industrial commercial, your bulldozers. Also had questions on that. What defines the temporary parking? I think how our code is currently written, you know, maybe some small tweaks to it, but I think this is just a little too excessive. My thoughts.
I do think that go ahead, Josh.
I was just gonna say, like, curious, hearing from a couple council members, right? This came to council first.
That's the other.
Why did they refer to us? Is there a specific, is that like how code works?
I don't recall that it was ever actually brought to council at a
Was
meeting.
Ben brought it up, I don't remember exactly when it was, but Ben brought it up and asked if they wanted to be, or, and maybe you weren't there, I don't know, but.
Ron didn't remember either, so.
Was that at the very end? Yeah, and he talked about, he did talk about bringing it forth before a PUD.
So
So again, that's what we're doing. And that's all this is based off council asking us to look at it and present something.
well, I guess my question in that, getting to that was, is that just like standard practice, that a complaint like this, they automatically send it this way, which is fine,
No.
totally fine? Or was there some other direction, like, hey, we think this, but don't think this, or was it
No.
like, we don't want to deal with it, so here it is?
And I think what it was the complaint was received, came into our office actually before it even went to city council. We replied back to the homeowner, we have absolutely no regulations to cover your issue. Sorry, nothing we can do. Then it came to council and essentially I know we had one council member who had a discussion with this person, and I think that was what the request was. Well, could you look at regulations regulating this?
I do think it's valuable, and I do think you're on the right path for us from a draft perspective, that there are some tweaks. We've certainly grown in our community. Things are very different. We have some streets that end up blocked off because there are some big commercial vehicles parked there. Oftentimes I can't think of the name of it, but the one that the scoop, there's someone's plumbing vehicle there every single day and people have to drive around it and wait their turn. So I do think it's worth looking at. I just think we need to be a little bit more intentional with definitions and then figure out, do we impact livelihood? Do we impact recreation of our residents? So I think it's a good first draft.
My concern mostly in this is, my interest mostly is the overnight parking on residential streets of commercial vehicles.
Mhm.
Because I'm mixed on this. If you say it's okay, because that's their livelihood, then what you're really saying is other citizens and the city are obligated to provide them a parking lot for their vehicles.
Yep.
And I'm not sure you really want to go that way. I think there are probably other places where they can rent parking space. What they're doing is they're just not choosing to do that. Right now, it's free because they can have their section of the street every night.
Mhm.
As a person that owns a boat and a camper, if you're going to allow commercial vehicles to do that, why can't I do that with my boat and my camper out in front of my house on East Salem?
Mhm.
What's the difference? And yeah, I understand they're making a living with that. But there also comes some responsibility with that. That doesn't mean they can just park wherever they want to. And park there night after night after night after night after night. Some in your ward,
Oh,
I
I
know where
know.
they are.
I know right where they're at.
But
I'm not objecting to the on-street. My issue is on their private.
oh, well, I'm not, that's not what I'm talking about.
Al, to your point, I would agree, like at that point, then do they get taxed differently because they're using it as commercial property, right? Do they have a supersede your use as a residential person? Charlie, is there anywhere when you looked at like, is there a street width designation that like streets that are a certain width, you can have certain parking? Or is it, that would be a very tough one, right? Like I know we.
And no,
Material stuff like that.
And I'll be honest, I only looked at a few cities on some of this stuff. A lot of them don't even, it was really hard to find other cities that regulated commercial vehicle parking on private property. There's a few that do it, and this was kind of a combination of all of those. So the on-street stuff, I think the ones that do it, I don't think anybody differentiates between widths of street or anything like that. And it's for, I guess it's for the purpose, it's those types of vehicles are doing damage. They're taking up room on streets more than other vehicles, and kind of asked, I think, what the intended use of the on-street parking is.
I mean, I think we've all kind of agreed that like on private property. It's private property and maybe they should be allowed to do that,
That focuses the inoperable stuff. And then our next focus is on street. So what can we work on that's related to parking on the street, whether it's commercial vehicle or recreational vehicle, because that's where that boat, camper, et cetera, comes into play.
Be curious to fire or anybody who've been on this one for on-street stuff, just with crowding on the streets, parking overnight.
That's where that 10 feet came from for the temporary stuff. It was between Public Works and Fire looking at that and saying that's what we really need. I mean, quite honest, fire would like a lot more than that, but 10 feet typically in an emergency situation, you should be able to make work.
So would it be possible, I don't want to speak for everybody else, but I think again, to everyone's point here, we're kind of all in the same direction here. Is there a way to maybe take another stab at this for next meeting, Charlie, that's focused more on the off-street.
Well, so
On-street parking, excuse me, off-property, on-street, gotta make sure I get it right.
yeah, so
Property on-street, and then with a better clarifier in some of the noise ordinance stuff, that's a little more scientific.
if I can go through this and just make sure that I completely understand, and if that's what we want to do, that's fine. I can also take a recommendation with these noted changes to planning and zoning, if we're there yet or not, I'll let you decide. But from what I got on 4805, it's really, we're fine with that, but we thought the hours of 10 to 6 were better, and putting that decibel on there, which I think we said was 60 possibly on there, and I'll clarify that, but we can again, that can be added on here. On 6909, looking at the parking limited on street, were there any issues with that section as written?
I guess I do have a little bit of a concern with prohibiting any period whatsoever of boats, campers, that kind of thing. Because I have seen a lot of cases where, you know, like you mentioned, someone goes to the lake, they have their friends over for dinner. Maybe there's not room for both boats and trucks in the driveway, and someone's just gonna park on the street for a couple hours, I guess. That I don't own a boat or a camper, but I could see where.
You want to buy one?
No,
We'll have to be careful from that perspective, right? With commercial street versus.
being cumbersome enough to limit people's. Maybe there's a reasonableness threshold. Is it for a certain period? Those types of vehicles, can we consider a certain period of time?
You're
that
saying
would
like
be allowed?
12 hours and 24-hour period, 8 hours. And
Mhm.
24 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
agree.
So that one.
So allowing them on street, but only for certain period of time. And I don't want to arbitrarily throw numbers out there necessarily, but is there a thought on, okay, what is the time of?
What'd you
More than
say?
one, less than 24.
That's our.
Would you say 12-hour?
I said 12 and 24, 8 and 24. One of the two, just depending on, it's kind of just trying to pick a
There are those.
reasonable starting place.
Or
You know,
between the hours of, so it's either number of hours or in a day or time of day.
to
kind
be
of
between
thing.
9 and 6.
Time of day would be a lot easier for.
Yeah, I was gonna say, is the whole point, we don't want them parked on street overnight.
Yeah.
You could match it to your sound where it's between 9 and 6,
10.
And then say.
7, 10 and 6, whatever. Whatever we said there.
Yep.
Yeah, that would be,
And then the next portion is everything in 165, no. Okay. So on private, we're good with that stuff, still maintaining on private property.
Yeah, the only other one I jotted down if we're ready to move forward is the unloading and loading of trucks like on the square. I know there's a lot of areas off the square too. I know there's someone who unloads at that liquor store on 92 West, and there's a big giant trailer parked in the middle lane while he unloads into that liquor store. So we might want to tweak the language that's not specific to the square, because I
Yeah, we
imagine
are.
92 and
Sarah, we are.
65. Okay,
We took the specific language of the square and applied it across the city.
perfect. Okay. That was my list.
So with that, I mean, I'll leave it to you. We can bring this back for another meeting if you want, or you can forward a recommendation with those changes and we can take it to council with that. I personally can tell you, I think we have enough direction to modify some stuff and take it to council, but I'll leave that up to you.
would that include taking out the spaces shall not be used for long-term?
Yeah, all the changes on 165 we would take out.
Okay.
Not that I don't trust you, but I'd kind of like to see it again.
Yeah, that's fine. No, that's fine.
And I really would like to have you give some thought about length of vehicles on the square. Commercial, just regular vehicles.
Parking in those diagonal and parallel
Yeah.
lot parking
The
spots.
Diagonal parking things. That important to consider, I think.
And add that to the,
I don't have an answer for you right now, but
Got a couple weeks out.
I'll get out my tape measure, start measuring vehicles. They'll wonder what is
We
that
can
guy
run some tests, Al. We'll all just go park in different spots and we can determine if we
Okay.
can drive past each
how long-
other and.
Circles here.
So to that point, so you,
we've got you, it's essentially, you're asking it to come back. Got the direction. If I have to go back and watch video, I will, so.
Any sort of, right, it's just tabled.
please email us your notes.
You want verbatim minutes sent to you? I can work on that.
Go.
I've got people for that. They'll love you.
All right, so then we'll move on to item number 8, any current projects?
Really, the only thing to, I think, keep the commission up to date, We are working through Prairie Glen for construction documents at the staff level on those ones right now. So that is going to be, it'll be the area between the current development and just north is that 18th Street that goes up there. Yeah, 18th Street that goes north, 18th or 19th Street. I don't know. So kind of up into the north. Working through that. You reviewed the preliminary plat a long time ago, Carrie. I know you weren't here, but it's that one. The other thing is we do have another commercial site plan that has been submitted for the piece of ground that is north of where the Champion Express car wash was going. It's for Take 5 Oil Company. We are currently reviewing that at the staff level right now. We've got our first round of comments off to the engineer on that one. So I would envision that that's probably going to be coming forward to you, the commission, in the next couple months.
Oil company.
It's like an express oil change.
Ah,
Okay.
okay.
Is the car wash going in as well?
Yes, they've closed on the property. I know that. So we're just waiting for them to start at this point, but.
All right, number 9, would anyone like to make a motion to adjourn?
I'd make that motion.
Second,
Adjourned.
Not quick enough.
bye guys.
All right.
Bye.
See.